revenue-generating opportunities.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations. Mr. Bessent, it's good to see you and enjoyed our meeting. I've got some specific questions I want to ask, but I don't want to litigate this now. But I do feel, as someone working with Senator Crapo and others, when we took on, I still think, the most comprehensive post-Simpson-Bowles, and we took arrows from each side. And I'm looking at any kind of pro-growth policies possible, but I just respectfully want to say there is not an industrial nation, first world industrial nation in the world that gets anywhere close to meeting their revenue needs, and I'm not proposing that America spend anywhere like the Europeans at 17 to 18% of GDP. It's never happened historically. It's not going to happen in a Trump administration or future Democratic administrations. So we'll have a time to talk back and forth on this, but I can't let some of this go without at least offering something that there's not an economist around that wouldn't concur. We got to bring down spend, but the revenue side alone is not. Excluding that, we're never going to get to a balance. I do want to raise on a more positive note, again, something I worked closely with the chairman on, and actually worked with your predecessor on, and was very proud of that relationship. I disagreed with Secretary Mnuchin on a lot of things, but I found a lot of things to agree with him on. And one was a relatively narrow part of the financial sector called Community Development Financial Institutions, CDFIs. Under the previous Trump administration, we put about $12 billion in. This serves access to capital for underserved communities. Under Senator Crapo's leadership, we built a bipartisan CDFI caucus, 12 Ds, 12 Rs. It's tough to get 24 bipartisan senators to agree on anything. It's kind of low-hanging fruit. There are things we can do to continue to expand this area, creating a secondary market. We've got some bipartisan legislation there, trying to reward patient capital. A lot of these institutions now have Tier 1 equity, but they've got to get patient capital. And again, Senator Crapo and I have worked with the current administration, would want to work with yours on something called the Economic Opportunity Coalition. But can you say a word or two about how you view CDFIs and this making sure that underserved communities get the access to capital so they can have their own American dream, how that fits into your lexicon?
Senator Warner, I enjoyed talking to you about CDFIs in your office. The early part of my career was as a financial services analyst, so I have a depth and breadth, and I believe that the breadth of the U.S. financial services industry is what makes the U.S. economy, differentiates the U.S. economy from the rest of the world. And I think the addition of these CDFIs into underserved communities are very important.
Well, I appreciate that. And again, it's bipartisan. And there are, again, you understand markets well. If we could spark a secondary market in this debt, we could leverage, and I'm talking about private capital, and I know that's what my colleagues like a lot, private capital, but we can leverage it exponentially. One of the things we discussed, and again, we talked about this in my office, and I don't want to, one of the things I was happy to hear, I feel very strongly that we cannot reward Vladimir Putin's aggressive, outrageous behavior in Ukraine. And I think the Ukrainians have performed remarkably. Obviously, they have manpower issues. I see this from the intel side on a daily basis. One of the areas that I think we have not done as well, and candidly, the sanctions regime, I don't think was as effective as it should have been. And I frankly think the Biden administration waited too late to put some of these additional sanctions on oil and tankers. The ability for Russia to retool. Listen, I hope if President Trump can settle this, hallelujah, the world would be better off. But one of the things we discussed in my office was the potential to actually increase the sanctions regime as a way to help further leverage that. Would you care to talk for a moment about that again?
Yes. So, Senator Warner, I believe that the sanctions regime, especially, well, first of all, I would say in my adult life that the tragedy going on in Ukraine is one of the greatest tragedies of my adult life, and ending that as soon as possible, and any role the Treasury can play in that, if confirmed, I would like to do. As we discussed, I believe that the sanctions were not fulsome enough. I believe that I believe that the previous administration was worried about raising U.S. energy prices during an election season, and I am perplexed to see that National Security Advisor Sullivan, on his way out the door, is raising the sanctions level on Russian oil companies. And indeed, the oil prices in the U.S. are up about 9% this month. So what was good for that administration is being foisted on us. But having gone from, I think, low-level sanctions to mid-level, that if any officials in the Russian Federation are watching this confirmation hearing, they should know that if I'm confirmed and if President Trump requests, and as part of his strategy to end the Ukraine war, that I will be 100% on board for taking sanctions up, especially on the Russian oil majors, to levels that would bring the Russian Federation to the table.
And I will only take 30 seconds. Let me just get 30 seconds. Thank you for that, because I think it's important that we don't take these tools out of the toolkit. We can litigate what the past administration did and when they did it, but increasing pressure on Putin to bring about a resolution, I very much appreciate your willingness, and I hope you will be an advocate for keeping those sanctions on and actually advancing them even further. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Warner. Senator Langford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bessent, good to see you again. Thanks for the time in the office to be able to talk through a lot of these details as well. I was interested to be able to hear your statistic you shared earlier that after the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, now we've had several years to be able to see what happened.